everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Workflow Automation, Data Security, and System Conversions for Today's Distributor. My name is Deja, and on behalf of PSDA, I would like to thank you all for joining us. Today's webinar is sponsored by Foundry Commerce. Before we begin, I would like to remind the audience to please feel free to submit questions throughout the event via the question chat box on your webinar toolbar. Our speaker will leave some time throughout the presentation to address questions. And now, I would like to turn the call over to today's presenter, Eli. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Deja, and thank everyone for jumping on the call today. We could easily spend an hour on each one of these topics individually, so certainly putting them together in a 1 hour time slot is going to be a bit of a challenge to move through, but we want to make sure we give you a high-level perspective on all of them, and certainly are happy to go deeper with anyone as needed. From an agenda standpoint, we didn't try to move our slide. There we go. We're going to take a look at workflow automation, what it means, why do we care, essentially how do we use it to stay competitive in today's marketplace. We're also going to take a look at what we need to know about data security. Most specifically, I think on everyone's mind is GDPR. What does that mean to everyone on the call? What do you need to know to stay compliant with your clients? And then, ultimately, finally, you have options on your choice of e-commerce and operating systems today. What are the types of things you should be thinking about, and what are the things you should be thinking about as you lead into the conversion process? I talk to distributors all the time, and we're used to thinking of ourselves as product providers, but just the fact that the listserv is lit up talking about data security, workflow automation, and system optimization tells me that based on those subjects, that we're keenly aware of the fact that we are technology providers at heart. Any business that sells product today needs technology, either client-facing or process-related, to collect orders and get those orders through the production process. One of the things that proves over and over is a conversation that happens weekly with our clients. We participate in technology presentations with our clients every week, and a week doesn't go by without a sales rep from one of them saying, the customer is looking for the Amazon experience. And whenever that conversation or those words are spoken, they're always spoken in fear associated with, can we provide that? Do you know what that means? And from our perspective, those words are actually words that we look for and are excited about. There really is no need to fear the Amazon experience. In many cases, we just have to make sure we understand what people are asking for. And a lot of times they don't know what they're really asking for. They just know what they like, and Amazon is providing it for them in their daily lives. So they want to make sure that they can achieve the same thing for their business. In understanding really what that Amazon experience is, or kind of walking back into, what is workflow automation and the experience that clients are looking for today, we like to look at what Amazon is and what Amazon isn't. At a high level, Amazon is actually very similar to us. They're similar to what we all do on a daily basis. I like to think of them as essentially the ultimate distributor. Amazon's business model consists of really two things. They take other people's products, put them into their warehouse, sell them online, and then efficiently distribute them when they're sold. Sound familiar? I mean, warehouse release is what we do all day, every day. Second thing that they do is they put people's products on their website, sell them, and then efficiently route those orders to the individuals who are going to be responsible for fulfilling them. So once again, drop shipping. The only thing that Amazon's business model, its core business model, is warehouse release and drop shipping. Both things that we do on a day-to-day basis. So what else is Amazon? Amazon is also an ultimate technology provider. Amazon has attracted as many orders as they have because they built an efficient online ordering environment that allows each user to efficiently order product from multiple vendors. They have also streamlined the delivery of those orders of that product by automatically routing orders to either their warehouses or their vendors through a highly evolved logic-based system. It's important for us to understand, that Amazon really isn't this mysterious entity. It's very similar to the businesses that we run, just on a much larger scale. It's also important for us to understand really what Amazon is not. The things that Amazon is delivering, by and large, are items that can be put on the shelf or items that can be delivered from a third-party vendor. What they're not delivering is custom manufactured products. But in that same light, we are able to look at and have examples of companies that have done custom manufacturing in a very efficient, through a very efficient workflow processes as well. Whether it's Vistaprint from a print standpoint or custom ink on the promotional product side, the same thing is true. They've built efficient online tools that allow customers to build and proof their custom product. And they have built highly efficient integrations with their production floor to make sure that any of those orders that flow in flow through their plant efficiently. Now, in their case, they're integrated with their own systems as distributors with custom manufacturing partners. We need to be able to automate multi-vendor supply chains in order to achieve that same level of efficiencies. So how do we go about providing, essentially that Amazon experience? 10, 15, even as recent as 5 years ago, customers were happy with what we had to offer them from a commerce experience, from a shopping cart experience. Today's customer wants us to give them what they want. So the script is flipped there. People expect us to deliver the interface and the experience that they're looking for. That customer experience is a lot of things to a lot of different people. It could be a custom look and feel, matching a client's brand. It could be, the notion of mobile friendliness. It could be customizing the experience down to the individual or down to the user based on, what language, what currency, what products, what categories, payment methods someone should see. Or it could be completely customizing how a user moves through the ordering experience. It could be completely divergent from what we're used to thinking of as a standard e-commerce order flow into something that more fits for their user base. And it really doesn't, the Amazon experience doesn't just stop with the experience of placing the order. That experience continues into the production process, allowing for efficient, timely delivery of products. A lot of times when consumers are saying that they want the Amazon experience, part of that is the online experience that they're used to. The other part of that is they can order product and in a few days it's on their doorstep. People expect us to deliver product quickly. Things that help us from a technology standpoint deliver on that new expectation are being able to create multi-vendor, multi-purchase order workflows that define essentially a supply chain, delivering specific information about a product to each member of that supply chain individually. Then we want to be able to, or should be able to, apply automation to the steps in that production process. So automatically routing orders to a series of vendors, a vendor or a series of vendors based on what product it is, who the user is, what location the items are going to, what quantity of item is being ordered. Essentially efficiently being able to allow our systems to move orders for us so that we can remove those touch points, remove time out of the process, and ultimately help deliver product faster to our customers. And then, like looking at Vistaprint or Custom Ink, where they're highly integrated with their production floors, working with vendors who are eager and willing to streamline processes with distributors. More and more vendors are looking for ways to efficiently manage orders that come from distributors. They want to integrate the order flow with their production processes, with their shipping systems, with their acknowledgement systems, so that as partners, we can together improve the experience of the customer and add efficiency to that order management process. So as a little bit of a shameless plug here, how does Foundry Commerce help our customers really provide that Amazon experience? We have over 250 points of customization, so essentially permission set settings that can be driven at company, user group, user, individual products, product category levels. We have the ability to completely redesign the mobile-friendly environment to match your customers' desired experience, not just a look and feel, but custom workflows, custom processes that can be built into the system. We allow for the creation of multi-vendor workflows. We can automate the entry of products into those workflows based on users, geographies, products, quantities. And then most importantly, I think really the willingness and the readiness to integrate with all manufacturing partners. We do not charge anyone in the supply chain to integrate with the system. We are actively encouraging that type of integration so that we can bring connectivity to the supply chain and add value to the network as a whole. At this point, I think it makes sense to, if we have questions, answer some questions about workflow automation, how to apply workflow automation to processes. If we haven't had questions come in yet, we can move into data security and handle more questions at the end. Looks like we haven't had any questions come in just yet, so we'll move into Data security. So, ultimately, by establishing the notion that we are technology providers, certainly we handle our clients' data through the course of, doing our jobs on a daily basis. And as a result, we need to know more about securing that data than any of us would like to, really. Regardless of what system you use to manage your order flow, whether it's e-commerce or back office, we have our clients' data stored in a database. Attracting new customers, and in a lot of cases, even now, continuing to do business with our current customers is requiring us to fill out security assessments. The security assessments range in their scope, but ultimately they are trying to limit the liability of the client itself and trying to pass that liability on to us to make sure that we are appropriately caring for the data that that particular customer is sharing with us in the interest of performing our duties. I should have warned you that this would be maybe a 2-cup of coffee event, but stick with me here if we can get through this slide, and I promise you it will get better. In terms of understanding data security at a very high level, we need to understand what some of the terms mean. There are 3 types or different types of identified data: PII, personally identifiable data; PCI, payment card data; PHI, protected health information. A few different terms related to data itself, at least the actions associated with data. Data in transit is just data being moved from one system to another, or one server to another. Data at rest is data that is not currently being used, but is being stored. There's a few different terms out there centered around protecting data, encryption and tokenization, really encryption versus tokenization. What encryption does is it essentially encodes data so that it can't be read without having the encryption key. If you have the encryption key, then you can get through the encryption layer and you can see the data on the other side of it. Tokenization actually takes the data point itself, replaces it with something that is a non-sensitive piece of data, and without essentially access to the tokenization system, you're not able to untranslate that data point. So if you see the data in the database, it really doesn't mean anything to you. If you've dealt with security assessments for your customers or filling out security assessments, you've likely seen the terms SSA 16, SSA 18, or SOX 2. Ultimately, the SSA definition or standard was created by a group of accountants, and really there's a couple of different review processes, one of which relates to financial data, one of which relates to just data in general. The SSA data process that we most often are involved with is the SOX 2 report. SOX 2 relates to, essentially security and availability of the data that's being stored. I'm sure everyone by now is familiar with PCI compliance and what standards are involved there. But ultimately, the question on everyone's mind today is, what is GDPR? As an acronym, General Data Protection Regulation. We're certainly going to look at that deeper here in a minute. But what is GDPR? I always want to say GDRP. It just rolls off the tongue easier. But GDPR, what is it? What does it mean to us? In terms of understanding really what a lot of the compliance regulations are, we need to understand or know what these data points are that fall under each definition. There's different levels of compliance requirements in handling different types of data. So if we're looking at personally identifiable data, this is certainly the area that has the most change to it through the course of time in terms of what is identified as sensitive data. Website and web traffic standards, change frequently on this, as really, quite honestly, as criminal use of the data changes. Originally, people were stealing credit card data because they were able to use it. Now people are stealing someone's name, someone's email address, someone's phone number, and using phishing attacks with just that amount of information to steal money and access further information. So ultimately, what is considered sensitive data through the course of time used to be really just social security numbers, passwords, usernames. Now things have extended into names, email addresses, phones, photos that are being stored. And really GDPR has formalized that shift into looking at the contact information, namely the name, email address, and phone as being now sensitive data that needs to be stored differently. PCI and personal or protected health information, in a lot of cases, the data points there have remained largely static through the course of time. With PCI, if you're storing data together, independent of the credit card numbers, the security numbers, or any of the data that's available via the magnetic strip, names and addresses were not considered sensitive, but in conjunction with, or it's stored alongside of the other data points with PCI, the regulations around the encryption of that data. And then with PHI, similar thing. The data points are the same, and largely, the storage of those data points has been treated similarly through the course of time. Inevitably, what all of it comes down to is compliance. Depending upon what opportunity you have, be it with a current, continuing business with a current customer, or winning the business from a prospect, what industry, what geography, what scope, what the scope of the client is, there are going to be different levels of compliance that you are going to need to achieve. I say legitimately because there are a lot of vendors who will say yes to win a deal. They will answer a security assessment the way that they know the customer is looking for them to answer it, but they're actually taking on an extreme amount of risk and exposure if there ever is an incident or an issue with that the data that is being stored and protected. Cyber insurance policies are great to have. Businesses certainly should have them, but the underwriting process for a cyber insurance policy is designed really to protect the insurance company, just like life insurance is designed to protect the insurance company. If you say you don't smoke and you smoke, if you ultimately smoked, they're not going to pay out. Similarly with cyber insurance, if you're profiling yourselves as protecting data a certain way, and then ultimately aren't doing that, they're going to, hold you liable there. So looking at different levels of, or different types of compliance. We visited a number of distributorships as we were building out our operating system, reviewing processes, reviewing workflows, and was kind of continually shocked at how many systems allow credit card data to be stored, be viewed, be printed on documents that are coming out of the systems. If you're handling credit card data, clients expect you to be PCI compliant. Now, at the level of transactions that any of us are processing, it is a self-assessment process. The self-assess, and it's called a QSA, a Qualified Security Assessment. There are a couple of different processes or a couple of different QSA forms. There's a short form and there's a long form. Depending upon the technology provider or partner that you have, you can oftentimes, if your technology provider is PCI compliant, you can do the one-page short form and be PCI compliant. If not, you would go through the longer form, it's roughly a 20-page process to just assure your handling of payment information is secure and in line with the guidelines. SSA or SOC 2 compliance is a more extensive or intensive process review. If any of you have come from corporate America, it's actually very similar to a Sarbanes-Oxley review. Really gets into, or I guess down to, hiring practices, background checks of people who have access to data, physical access to data points. How is it security guard? Is there key access? Electronic access to data. Essentially, everything designed to protect the data that's being stored. The larger opportunities will expect that either the data is stored in a SSA compliant environment, or they are devoid of that. They're going to want to review your processes, specifically your data security processes, to make sure that their data isn't at risk. And then ultimately, the elephant in the room, as May 25th is around the corner, GDPR compliance. I did it again. European Union put out the GDPR protocol really a couple of years ago, and compliance is set to go into effect later this month on the 25th. When you break down compliance, it really isn't actually that scary. There aren't a ton of things that we need to do differently. Main things are working with technology providers to make sure that the adjustments to the systems and policies are made that comply with it. Creating a GDPR statement for your organization that you can provide to customers, and then taking a look at privacy notices and making sure that your privacy notices reflect new guidelines. So from a system standpoint, in addition to username, password, social security number, driver's license numbers, that were previously, best web practices dictated that those elements be encrypted in transit and storage. Now we need to make sure that names, email addresses, phones, photos are also being encrypted in both transit and in storage. So just working with your technology providers to make sure that that data is being protected appropriately, and then also, ultimately creating policies or procedures around removing a user's data. One of the key components of the GDPR statement is that people have the right to remain anonymous. So from an anonymous shopping experience or a self-profile environment, making sure that you have guest checkout available so people can check out without creating a profile. As a part of guest checkout, the system should be designed at minimum to disassociate an address from an order or a order profile, and then at maximum ultimately clear that address from the database once the action is, once the order's been fulfilled. So truly creating that anonymous shopping experience. And then secondarily, users essentially have the right to ask for their data profile to be removed. So developing a process around how that would work with your technology provider if you had a customer make that request of you, how do you go about removing that user's profile from the database. Many customers and prospects, if you haven't had the question yet, it will be coming certainly in your larger opportunities for sure. You're going to ask the question of how you have prepared for GDPR and whether or not you're compliant. Creating a GDPR statement just allows you to be prepared for that question. Statements are not, they don't have to be that extensive. There's a standard format out there, introduce obviously what the task is, state your commitment to it, define how you are preparing or how you have prepared, how are you protecting data, how is the data retained and erased, what happens if there's a data breach, how is the data that's provided being used, what are the limitations of that use, and then ultimately identify the people inside of the organization, or at least the roles inside of the organization that are responsible for making sure that you remain compliant. We're going to be sending out, as a follow-up to this discussion, the PowerPoint slides to the session. If you'd be interested, just reply to that email, and I'd be happy to provide a copy of our GDPR statement, just so that you can kind of get an example and have maybe a little bit of a track to follow if you're looking to create one of your own. The privacy policy update is really the third thing, and at a high level, kind of the final thing you need to worry about or be thinking about with GDPR. If you are not dealing with e-commerce customers, or if your e-commerce customers are non-self-profiling, they're not creating their own profile, you would just put a new privacy policy on your website. If you have e-commerce environments where people are allowed to create their own profiles, you'll want to make the privacy policy at minimum available during that creation process, and ideally have your users actually accept that privacy policy. in the user creation process. Again, privacy policy itself just defines, what data are you storing from that user and how is it being protected. Just as kind of a side note relating to the privacy policies themselves, a lot of you may have experienced the recent upgrade or requirement of TLS 1.2. There's security protocols essentially associated with moving data across the web. If your systems are working with other systems, integrating with UPS, FedEx for real-time shipping rates, those types of things, you would have had to have updated to TLS 1.2 data protection. But some of the internal systems may still be using TLS 1.0. Unlikely that people are still using SSL secure socket, but it certainly could exist out there. You may want to look at that and just make sure that you are TLS 1.2 across all of your internal and external traffic. Privacy policies a lot of times will identify the protocols that you're using to move data. So ultimately the privacy policies for companies like ours, or e-commerce provider, is interesting because each one of the sites that gets put online can have different products, different product offerings, different audiences. So what we've done to accommodate the requirements is we actually allow our customers to post privacy policies, require sign-off on privacy policies when they're needed. So if the environment requires it, if they're dealing with European clients, or if they want to put privacy policies out, one e-commerce environment may just be a site to order apparel items. One may be a site that somebody is building a multi-touch multimedia campaign where actual customer data is being uploaded. So there's very different policies that could be presented to the customer based on the site that they're entering, and we help our customers craft the privacy policies to cover the intended use of the sites themselves. Really the problem for any company, but specifically, companies like Foundry Commerce, technology providers who have customers who are relying on us, to stay current with the moving target that is data security, is really just staying ahead of and knowing what is coming as it relates to new regulations associated with data security, new processes, new protocols associated with protecting data, whether it's moving from TLS 1.0 to TLS 1.2 for transit, or whether it's moving from encryption methods to tokenization methods in storage, just making sure that we're never exposing our customers to risk and staying current with security protocols. A week doesn't go by where one of our clients doesn't have us involved with filling out security assessments. Any opportunity that is of, with an organization of any size is going to, have to pass security personnel. So just from a high level, Foundry Commerce is PCI compliant, we're GDPR compliant. All of our data centers are SSAE 16 compliant. All of our traffic is 1.2 protocol, and we do actually carry a blanket cyber insurance policy that protects and covers our clients and their data. Really from a distributorship standpoint, as we look at technology, I think it's an exciting time for you. I've been involved and a part of the PSDA since 2001. For the first 15 years of my time with the PSDA, the technology offerings were the same and the dialogue was the same. Essentially, when is someone going to build a new product for this industry? Now you have multiple new options to review, and whether you're just looking at new e-commerce offerings or you're looking at new full system offerings, the technology is making leaps forward, not steps. And whether it's current providers who are being forced to shift their thinking and move their platforms forward, or it's new participants that are coming in with fresh ideas, fresh approaches to handling orders in this industry, I think the distributorships that are a part of it can benefit greatly. Anytime you're looking at a system conversion, ultimately you're going to be looking at, or always have been looking at, the notion of internal cost benefits. 10 or 15 years ago, that was really the only thing that you were considering. Now, there's really two components to the consideration. There's a customer-facing component that didn't really exist 15 years ago for many of you. Now, almost everyone has e-commerce environments that are integrated with the back office systems. And in a lot of cases, it is those e-commerce environments, or the strength of the e-commerce environments, that are kind of forcing people to look at and think about changing what they're doing from a system standpoint to make sure that they're continuing to meet the client needs. So many of you have experienced changing systems in the past, whether it's moving from the majors into distributorships, or moving from one company to another. The industry is certainly changing fast. If you are looking at a change, if you're thinking about a change, there's a lot of things to be thinking about. Does my current system allow me to, can I meet my current customers' needs? Can I take advantage of opportunities that are out there? And am I able to operate efficiently? Ultimately, do you feel good about your ability to compete now and into the future? As you step into a conversion process, or we look, again, high level at a conversion process, data conversion in and of itself is not really that scary of a process. But there certainly are different layers to the types of data that get brought forward, and those layers have increasing levels of complexity, not necessarily defining them as difficult, but there are different levels of complexity. Flat data is always easiest to move. So, things like, here's my list of customers, addresses, products, pricing. Here are my list of vendors. Basically it's a flat representation by and large part in the database. The things that get a little bit harder to move are your e-commerce environments. You've got essentially a multi-dimensional approach. You could have products that belong to categories, groups that belong to, users belong to groups, category accesses, permissions that get layered in. A lot of different things to consider that aren't necessarily flat on a page, they're multi-dimensional. And then generally speaking, the hardest thing to bring forward or recreate is order history. And the reason for it is order history is multidimensional as it relates to a database. An actual order needs to reach into products, reach into pricing tables, reach into address files. And not only is it multidimensional, but you need to actually represent a complete historical representation of what was at a point in time. So what was, an address that the customer may no longer use, but if I want to represent that order history and have it work in a dynamic way from a database standpoint, that address needs to exist for that order to work that was placed 4 years ago. So there's certainly, bringing over storefront data, bringing over client data, bringing over order history, all of those things are possible. But as you're looking at conversions and looking at the types of things that you want to carry forward, there are a lot of ways to represent order history alongside of current orders so that those things can be presented to clients efficiently and effectively without actually importing order history or complete order history. When you're looking at migrating systems, it's really a nice time to revise, revisit, your data structure and your processes. Are you doing things a certain way because it's efficient, or just because the current systems have forced you to do certain things? Is the data set that you're working in clean? Or as you move forward and as you look at migrating data to a new system, it's a great opportunity to clean up the data, removing e-commerce environments, clients, pricing table, things that you don't need to carry forward to run the business. We can start by cleaning out those types of data sets. And then really it's an opportunity to take a fresh approach to your data and your processes. We like to think about this term taxonomy. Taxonomy is just a fancy word for classifying, putting a naming convention associated with the objects that exist in your database. So how you're naming and numbering your products or your customers, your vendors, how you're going to number your orders, your purchase orders, just bringing uniformity to the process so that everyone on the team has a way of doing things and the data can get clean going forward. And then also looking at processes and flows. Are there things that new systems offer that allow you to, with slight data modifications, take your hands off of a lot of the repetitive processes, bring automation into your processes so that you don't need to, carry bad or existing processes into new systems. Ultimately, depending upon how big your organization is, there's going to be varied approaches to, performing a migration, performing a conversion. If you are, a smaller distributorship that, largely you're considering moving flat data, it's easy to migrate that data and essentially, perform a training, flip a switch, and one day you're working on one system, the next day you're working on a new system. Larger organizations that we've worked with, it's certainly a lot more difficult to take the switch flip approach. There's a lot more risk associated with that approach. So we've come up with a couple of different approaches that have worked in, through the course of time. One of which is an approach where we ultimately break the project out into one of which is the client-facing component. So, moving your e-commerce environments first, making sure the customer move it takes place and everything associated with that move has settled, then follow with the operating system move and the organizational move. The other approach is taking a group of accounts at a time, and essentially pulling a group of accounts from one system to the next. Just allows you to kind of take bite-sized chunks out of the conversion and not have as much risk associated with a wholesale flip of the switch. So just we've moved through a lot of things quickly, and we still have time for questions. Just one shameless plug here. We certainly would love to have discussions with any of you who are considering a move, whether or not the move just involves e-commerce. Our application has massive amounts of configurability, allows you to say yes to your customer, gives them that online Amazon experience. We are integrating with Quantum, Kramer Schmalko, and Demand Bridge, so you don't need to lose that connectivity if you need to upgrade your front end. Modern operating system, please feel free to reach out to us if you'd like to take a look at e-commerce or back-end offerings. I think we've got about 10 minutes left for questions. If so, one of the questions that came through here: can you implement with custom applications such as traditional business forms? Absolutely. So any of the processes that take place inside of the kind of the typical processes that take place inside of this industry, whether it's business forms, that type of stuff was kind of the baseline for what we can do from an implementation standpoint or an integration standpoint. And then beyond that, can extend into kind of other areas as well, multi-touch, multimedia stuff, the apparel, the promo workflows, but certainly single supplier or multi-supplier traditional business forms is not a problem at all. So we have a second question here. Multi-vendor and apparel orders, which are complicated, the garment size and sizes being an ever-increasing challenge. Can you address this specific issue as a better context? So, a couple of things that you can do from an apparel standpoint. So ultimately, most people's apparel workflows would contain a couple of different vendors, one of which, call it Sanmar, Alpha Broder, second of which would be your embroiderer or your decorator. Some of the workflows that we see from an apparel standpoint may have a creative department that's setting up the logo, Sanmar, an embroiderer, and then, a warehouse. So however many steps there are associated with delivering to the apparel products, you can build those workflows, and then ultimately by staging the workflow. So if I say, okay, Sanmar is going to be the first step, and modern embroidery is going to be the second step, Sanmar is going to get shipping instructions, call it PSST, to modern embroidery. Modern embroidery will then get the shipping address for the customers. Typically speaking, what we've seen when dealing with embroiderers is that they have been challenged to get the details right. We'll put it that way. And to accommodate for that, we see a lot of distributors creating Excel spreadsheets, basically defining everything, every line item, down to the color, the size, the logo option, what needs to go into that line. The supplier environments that get created anytime you add a supplier to the system work perfectly for the embroidery step in the process, in as much as your embroiderers can log in, choose a date range, and dump a purchase order line item report, and it will essentially be that Excel file for them. It'll contain the order line, the shipping information, as well as all of the specifications. And then it'll also contain tracking information so that they can understand, which shipment from Sanmar should I be looking for that particular item in. So hopefully that at a high level kind of talks at least to some of the multi-vendor stuff for apparel, but certainly happy to talk further with you. I'm not sure who put that question through, but we'd be happy to talk further about how we accommodate multi-workflow or multi-vendor workflows specifically for apparel. I don't see any other questions here at the moment. So like I said, we will be sending out the slides as a follow-up. Would be happy to have conversations with anyone to dive deeper into these topics. I know we just kind of scratched the surface on all of them. Would be happy to go further. If you would like to see at least our version of GDPR statement, happy to provide that as well. Just let me know what we can do to help.
Thank you, Eli. I would like to give a big thank you to our presenter today. Before we conclude, please make notes of our upcoming webinars and past webinars by visiting psda.org. A recording from today's webinar will soon be available on the website. We'd like to thank our presenter again and everyone online for attending the event today. There will be a survey after this webinar for you to complete. We thank you in advance for your feedback. Thank you again for attending today's webinar, and have a great day.